many years ago. We've worked together through various chapters of our lives, but as you saw in the invite, that Niven has a wide and varied career across multiple organizations, both in South Africa and internationally, including being the CEO, and I think you were, if I stand to be corrected, Niven, you were the founding CEO of Businesswomen Association. Niven was also the CEO of NOAH, which is Nurturing Orphans of AIDS for Humanity. Niven has been head of external strategy and then head of the South African Reserve Bank Academy, which was a groundbreaking initiative that she put together. And then went on to hold a senior position as head of leadership and culture for Standard Bank Group, Southern Africa. After that, Niven went on, which is where she is now, and is currently the MD of Niven Posma Inc., which works as leadership culture and strategy and facilitates for clients around the world, including Australia, Germany, South Africa, United Kingdom, and the UAE. She also lectures on navigating office politics at Henley Business School and on various leadership development programs locally and internationally. Niven is also just literally, when I say it's hot off the press, it is hot off the press, ladies and gentlemen, has just published her book. If you don't do politics, politics will do you. And we are very privileged and very excited to have Niven with us today to talk on this subject matter, especially as the book has literally just been launched in the last 2 days. So Niven, without any further ado, over to you, and thank you for joining us today.
Oh, such a pleasure, Kelvin. Thank you, and congratulations to you and Melanie for putting something like this together. I think it's so much easier to complain about how overwhelming things are and to be devastated in the face of how overwhelming things are than to actually get out and do something and to seek to connect people and to seek to build a tribe and a community. So congratulations to you, and I'm delighted to be part of it. So just some extra background beyond the bio that Kelvin so kindly shared. I, as Kelvin mentioned, I've had a range of senior and executive positions really my whole career. And 3 years ago, I started up my own business. I don't know about you, but I got to the stage in my mid-40s where I suddenly thought, I'm never filling in a leave form again. And even as an executive, even as a CEO, you've got to fill in leave forms. And I thought, no. So I started up my own business and met with a very good friend a few weeks into it, and he has his own very successful business. And I started telling him about some of the things that I would be doing, the kind of services I would offer and what have you. And all of a sudden he just stopped me and he said, no, okay, that's fine, Niven, but I'm going to ask you a different question. Rather than you telling me all about the services you offer, can you tell me what problem you are seeking to solve and what problem you do solve through the work that you do? And I still remember which coffee shop in Johannesburg we were in, and I still remember the table we were sitting in because it came to me in an instant. And I realized it's a problem that I haven't actually just sought to solve in my own business. It's a problem that I've sought to solve my whole career in all the leadership positions that I've held. And the problem is this. On the one hand, you've got piles and piles of research, and they just keep coming at us about how disengaged employees are at work, how destructive, how toxic workplaces are by and large. And I read a new stat, well, it was new for me, even though it's not a new statistic, just the other day. It was done in about 2015, a survey in the States, where it said 35% of the employees surveyed, and this was thousands of employees, said that they would forego a substantial, and these are the exact words, a substantial pay rise in return for seeing their immediate manager fired. I thought, gosh. So we have these, by and large, disengaged people, organizations that really are broken in a whole bunch of ways when it comes to leadership and how we are treating people. And that's a given. I mean, there's just all kinds of research about it. And then on the other hand, you've got all kinds of research as well that says the majority of people, majority of adults, and the number hovers at around 80%. If they were to become financially independent, so somebody, left them a bequest, they won the lottery, whatever. But if they were to become financially independent such that they did not have to work, 80% of adults would still want to work. So, I mean, think about it for a moment. It's a fascinating paradox. Yeah, we have these broken organizations and people who can't wait to get home every day. And yet, 80% of us, roundabout, want to work. We are wired as people to contribute, to do something that matters, to leave a legacy in the world. And for many of us, that's through the work that we do. And so in that moment of Graham asking me the question, I said, that's the problem that I've actually always sought to solve. In the teams that I've led, in the organizations and departments I've led, how do I make the workplaces that I'm responsible for, the people I'm responsible for, feel like when they're coming to work, they're coming to an island of sanity and an island of support, an island of accountability, no question, but also of sanity and support, where what they do and who they are really matters. And so this is, like I say, what I was doing. And as I was starting out, a friend, an ex-colleague who subsequently became a very good friend, asked me if I could develop a module for her very successful leadership development program, which she runs throughout Africa. And I said to her, sure, what's it about? And she said, office politics. And I'm like, oh, no, Helen, thanks for the offer. It's always nice to stretch myself and to think of new things to get immersed in, but office politics, are you kidding me? I can't stand the subject. I'm completely allergic, not interested. And it's funny how these things happen, right, in our lives and in the conversations that spark things. And that was one of the conversations that sparked something quite fundamental for me in my career, because I went home, I thought about it, and I thought, gosh, you know, the fact that I am so allergic to this idea means that there is surely something I could be learning about office politics. And if I can learn it, and if there's value in me learning it, then certainly there'd be value in me teaching it. And so I spent about 2 months doing a whole bunch of research around the subject, around organizational dynamics, around power, around politics, and not just doing research out there, but actually also taking the time and the opportunity to think about my own career and think about not the successes, not the times that I shot the lights out, but the times when I really, really hit my head against a brick wall. And I mean, you can all relate, and some of you might be hitting your head against a brick wall right now. And so when I thought about my career, read the research, what I put into my lectures, which I now give in a number of places on a number of programs, and which I've expanded on in the book, what I put in are the things that would have helped me, that would have practically made me think differently and hopefully act differently. You know, if it was incredibly conceptual and fantastically intellectually interesting, well, that's great for a PhD, but it wouldn't have helped me. And it's about 3 years now since I've been doing the lecturing, and it's fascinating. What I've realized is that what would have helped me would have helped most people. And that this is really a subject that no one talks about and no one teaches you. And yet, as you'll see during the course of the webinar, this is absolutely critical to everything that is going on around you. So that by way of introduction. But what I'd like to do is get a sense not just of who I am in the telling to you, but also a sense of who you are from this wonderful diverse group that Kelvin and Melanie have drawn and pulled together. So give me 1 second, I'm going to pause the sharing, and then I'm going to show you another screen, and I'll explain to you what I need you to do.
Okay, so while Niven's doing that, ladies and gentlemen, we can ask you to please, during the session today, if you have questions for Niven or comments on the subject matter, please pop them in the chat box, because Melanie will be facilitating Q&A afterwards. And yeah, we always like to get as many comments as possible. Right, back to you, Niven.
Thanks, Kelvin. And hopefully it is now sharing.
It is.
Fabulous. I love it when things work in the dry run and work in reality. Okay, so for those of you who've never used Menti, it's a fabulous online polling tool that I use in a number of sessions. And the instructions are fairly self-explanatory and at the top of the screen. Use your phone, use your laptop, use whatever device is most handy. Go to the URL at the top, so menti.com. You'll be prompted to enter a code. The code is 131655, so again on your screen. And just answer the question that'll pop up on your device, the question that's on the screen. Use 3 words to describe office politics. So I'll give it a few seconds for the first ones to start coming in, and then I'll give it a few minutes. Just let's see the word cloud that starts to emerge. And this is anonymous, so be frank. Boring? Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yep.
This tool is amazing.
Yeah, it does some fabulous things. Actually, I use it in a lot of the strategy sessions that I run. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. Okay, so we've had 5 people put in. I'll give the rest of you a few more seconds. Okay, so toxic is still top of the list. No surprises there.
Nevin, before you go on to the next question, we've had 1 or 2 people ask if you can just give the instructions again of where they go on the code, and I think they missed the first round before you do the next questions.
So I'm just going to do this question. So yeah, for those of you who missed it, have a look at your screen. It does give you the instructions there. Menti.com, M for mother, E for egg, N for November, T for tango, I for igloo. So menti.com. You'll be asked to enter a code. The code is 131655. And the moment you do that, this question will pop up, and you just enter 3 words, up to 3 words. You don't have to enter 3 words. Okay, so toxic. Let's have a look at these. Toxic, exhausting, destructive, demotivating, bullying, unpleasant, gossip, time wasting, intimidating, ungratefulness, backstabbing, distasteful, power struggles. Yeah.
Very interesting.
These are the words I hear all the time when I ask this question. Draining, gossip and lies, disrespect. I'm glad somebody put up the word, it's just popped now, hard work. Yep. And egos. Okay, so I'm not finding anything positive. I mean, it kind of runs the gamut from toxic to sad, which is sad, to real and reality. So at least there's a level of acknowledgement about how prevalent it is. Opaque, that's a good word. Yeah. So cruel, that's a devastating word, but it's not an unusual word that people use. Okay, so take a moment to just look at the word cloud that you have all formed. And take heart from the fact that if somebody had asked me this question a few years ago, these are exactly the same words that I would have used. I may have even had a couple of expletives in there because I really, really did not like it. And I'm now going to pause and I'm going to start the presentation. Now that I've got a sense of you, you've got a sense of each other, and we've got a sense of how you see office politics. So give me a sec.
Okay, so while Niven's doing that, please remember your questions in the chat box, and we'll be doing Q&A at the end.
Okay, so my presentation should be back up.
Yep, it's up, Niven. Go ahead.
Lovely. So the words that you've used, like I said, are not unusual. Not at all. In the lectures that I've given in South Africa and around the world on the subject, in conversations I was having just this morning at a Pilates class. And so you're absolutely right in what you're talking about when it comes to office politics. A lot of what you're talking about is absolutely real. And I'm going to show you a quick video clip, which is quite entertaining. It takes all the things that you guys said and really ramps it up a level. So for those of you who know the Netflix House of Cards series, and if you don't know it, it really doesn't matter. Kevin Spacey is the vice president of the US and is aiming to become the president, and through all kinds of very underhanded means does become president. And so this quick video that I've put together kind of takes the comments that you gave in the word cloud and, like I say, amplifies them. So have a look, because this is the kind of story we all have about office politics. Can you guys hear it?
No, there's no sound, Niv.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, never mind. I'm going to move on, and I will send you the video clip on the WhatsApp call.
Okay.
So you will be able to get it afterwards. I'm experimenting with an external microphone, which I've been told makes all the difference. It is also causing all kinds of interesting issues on my Mac.
As they do.
As they do. So I will send you that clip. It's about a 2-3 minute clip, and it's great. So basically what he talks about in that clip is, like I say, the kinds of things that you guys have said. He talks about those who are climbing to the top of the food chain can have no mercy. It is hunt or be hunted, ruthlessness. And so again, I want to repeat, you are absolutely right. That is part of politics, and all of us would be completely naive to say that it's not. But I also want to say that you've only got half of the story. Because if you think that those toxic, negative, destructive, cruel, sad, bullying, time-wasting things that you see and that you thought about when you entered the word cloud are all that there are to politics, you are missing a really important trick. Because on the screen, you'll see now what the actual definition of politics is. It's about the informal, unofficial, sometimes behind the scenes efforts that are all about selling ideas, increasing power, or pretty much anything else. And so if you take a moment to look at that definition and contrast it to the word cloud and your own understanding of office politics, hopefully there's a little bit of a light bulb going on that this definition is completely and entirely neutral. There's nothing positive or negative about the informal or the unofficial or the behind the scenes. They're value neutral, values neutral. And so absolutely, if there's a negative element, by definition, there can also be a positive element. And so part of the distinction I make, and that I really hope that you can take away from what I'm saying, is if politics is neutral, well, good grief, there's bad politics all around us. And we see it, and some of you may have been the victims of it in really quite horrible ways. But there are also a whole bunch of opportunities for good politics, which are critical for all of us to get right in our careers. And by being completely allergic to the idea of politics, just because you only see the one story, the negative story, the story of bad politics, is really missing an opportunity. And like I said, I've had a great career. I've had lots of fabulous opportunities. And I did not know this fundamental truth. I was just finding it so distasteful. I didn't even see the upside and the potential to show up as somebody who is decent and who plays politics. Because of course, that's also part of what's implicit in what came up in your responses. That you can either be a good person, a decent person who lives their values, or you can play politics. There's no ways it can be a both and. And I'm telling you, it can be a both and. And not only can it be a both and, but it actually has to be a both and. For your sake, for your team's sake, and for your organization's sake. So have a look here at a quote that hit me square between the eyeballs when I read it. The question is not whether organizations will have politics, but what kind of politics they will have. And so Kelvin said, you know, I've worked in NGOs and I'm on the board of Kotlin's, and I am very grateful for the experience that I've had in the fundraising arena, in the not-for-profit arena. It is incredibly rewarding work, and it's incredibly humbling to see what some people are able to achieve with really very little, and in some cases, nothing. But I mean, come on, even in NGOs with people who are wanting to save the world and who are really determined to do the best that they can for their society and their community, there are politics. There are those informal, unofficial, behind-the-scenes things going on to sell ideas, increase power, or achieve other objectives all the time. Either in the organization, or between the organization and donors, or in the communities you work with. You don't escape it in NGOs. You also don't escape it in academic institutions. I've got friends who are academics and professors, and they said, Niv, the fights are so vicious because the stakes are so low. I have another friend who was a minister for 10 years in the church. So she led a congregation, she dealt with all the things that come with being the head of a church. And after 10 years left the church to go and take up a corporate role. She wanted to really just change her life quite fundamentally. And she said, you know, she was really nervous about this whole idea of corporate politics because she'd heard so much about it. And she said, do me a favor. A few months in, I thought, anybody who thinks corporate politics are difficult has no idea what church politics are like. And so this is the reality of people and organizations. And so I often have to correct people when they say, oh, you talk about corporate politics. And I said, no, I talk about office politics, organizational politics, because they are in every single organization. And the reality is that I think a lot of us who are attracted to the NGO sector and spend years of our lives and careers working in it are idealists. We believe fervently in making things better and leaving the world better than we found it. And that's fabulous. And that's a beautiful thing in a world that's going through a whole bunch at the moment. I actually watched a fantastic webinar the other day, and it said, or the title of the webinar was, Same Planet, Different World. And I thought, gosh, well, isn't that exactly right? And so we are idealists, and the world needs idealism, and it needs the passion to make things improve. And so I'm not asking you to let go of the idealism. What I am asking you to do, or inviting you to do, is to balance the idealism with some pragmatism. Absolutely focus on the world and how it could be and how it should be and how you would like it to be. But take some time to acknowledge how it actually is as well. And the reality is, exactly like is on the screen, Kathleen Kelly-Reardon is a professor in the States who spent her whole life studying organizational politics. And her book title says it beautifully, which is why I've put it in. It's all politics. Winning in a world where talent and hard work are not enough. And yes, we can have the conversation, but they should be enough. And your work and your technical skills should speak for themselves. Keep working towards that world. Don't lose the idealism. But in the current world of organizations and people and power, it's not enough. Because it is about the politics, it is about the relationships, it is about power, and it's about perceptions. And these are often things, we get very uncomfortable with. There's a great quote from Rosabeth Moscanto, who's a Harvard Business School professor. And she says, power is the last dirty secret of organizations. Power and politics and relationships and perceptions. We don't talk about these things, which is why they're the last dirty secret. But you do not escape them. You will find them everywhere. And everywhere, literally and metaphorically. I was in Lagos a few years ago. My sister was living there. And I was caught in the most appalling traffic. Anybody who's been to Lagos or who lives in Lagos will tell you, you can say goodbye to hours, if not years and months of your life sitting in the traffic in Lagos. Anyway, so I was sitting in the traffic and it took me about 2 hours to travel less than 6 kilometers. But because of security concerns, I wasn't allowed to get out. Another whole story. So I was sitting there and I had a lot of time to think. I had a lot of time to look at Lagos life around me. And all of a sudden, I saw this huge billboard in front of me. And I think it was from MTN, but I'm not entirely sure. But the slogan just stopped me dead in my seat. And what the slogan said was, you're not in the traffic, you are the traffic. And it's the same with politics. You might think you are not playing it, you are not affected by it. You are. You do any kinds of informal, unofficial, behind the scenes things to get your agenda advanced in the interests of yourself and your team and your organization in a way that you think is ethical, even though everyone else is not ethical. You are playing politics. You are part of this. So how are you going to show up in it? How are you going to use it to your advantage, given that you're not going to escape it? And this is also a bit of a wake-up call. We can tend to rely on our academic qualifications, our technical skills, our sparkling personality. Guys, I can take you through study after study after study that shows it's not those things that make the difference in your career. It's about your political skills, your political intelligence, your ability to navigate the relationships and the power and the perceptions. And so if, politics make that much of a difference to your success, well then equally not being politically smart can derail your career quite fundamentally. And again, piles of research, but one of the bits of research that I particularly like. So Jeffrey Pfeffer, professor at Stanford, he's been there his whole career, so over 40 years. And his book, Leadership BS, is superb. He says, we can talk about what leaders and organizations should do, or we can look at what organizations and leaders actually do. And let's look at the empirical evidence rather than the normative aspirations and hopes. And so let me read you something that comes out of this book. One critical time for career derailment is when, in their first jobs post-graduation, people move from positions where they can succeed based mostly on their individual performance and into more interdependent roles where political skills become more important. The next critical time comes around 20 years later, when, if successful, people have reached very senior hierarchical levels where everyone around them is smart and accomplished. And at that point, the differentiating factor is the ability to navigate increasingly political charged environments that are peopled by those who mostly do not fulfill the leadership industry's prescriptions. So it is critical to your success. If you fall off the cliff in your career, it's probably because of politics. And while it becomes more and more important the more senior you become, it is important all through your career from the moment you start. And so that, by way of context and by way of anchoring what office politics actually are, which, as you can see, are very different to what most of us think they are, And they're different because they're neutral. So you have the positive potential as much as the negative. And they are critical. It's not something you can opt out of. Well, I mean, you can choose to opt out. That's entirely your choice. But understand the impact it could have and will have on your career. So if that's what I'm talking about, well, okay, that's fine. But I mean, we're living in a very different world on the same planet, like I said. So in this time of COVID-19, where we are all working remotely, trying to figure out what's going on, again, I had the conversation just this morning, and it's not an unusual conversation, but it wasn't even 3 hours ago, where somebody was saying to me, yeah, but surely all of this office politics stuff falls away now that we're working remotely, and we probably will be working remotely for months, if not years to come. And all of these things that you're talking about, surely they fall away and they're not an issue. Because, I mean, isn't this the dream on some levels? I mean, not the economic collapse and the social collapse and the real devastation that's coming at all of us. Surely that's less a dream and more of a nightmare. But the dream of, I get up in the morning, I have a 37-second commute to the office, maybe 47-second commute if I stop for some coffee. You know, so long as I'm okay from the waist up on calls, who cares what I'm doing, from the waist down in terms of clothing. I mean, what a pleasure. Isn't this why people don't want to work in offices? Because they have all these upsides, and one of the biggest upsides is that they don't have to deal with office politics. Mistake, guys. Big mistake. Let me show you a quote and give you a second or two to read it. So I talk about this quote often in lectures and workshops. We treat work, too many people treat work like school. Think that if you put your head down, get on with things, you'll get an A. And if that happens in real life, how much more the potential and the risk exists that it'll happen in virtually and in remote offices as well. Because essentially what this is about is the classic mistake that so many people make. You focus on the task, because I mean, that's what you're being paid for, right? These things that I need to deliver. They focus on the task at the expense of the relationships, or not even considering the relationships. I mean, the relationships are a distraction. I'm here to do this. I'm here to deliver these things. And networking and building relationships and managing perceptions, I mean, those are all distractions from my real job. I'm here to tell you, they're not distractions. They are such a critical part of your real job. And so this focus on the technical output rather than the relationship component that enables, or in some cases disables, what you are able to do is a huge mistake. And that mistake and the risk of making that mistake just gets bigger in remote environments. Because now even more so, you're not seeing people. So even more so, the relationships are falling by the wayside. And one of the things that people often, I can see in lectures, take a step back and realize with quite a degree of shock, is what I'm about to say, which is some of the most important decisions of your career, and sometimes about your organization, given that a lot of you are reliant on donor funding, are going to be made when you are not in the room. So who is in the room on your behalf? And in the absence of relationships, in the absence of perceptions that serve you, if you are invisible, and if you are becoming increasingly invisible now in this time of remote working, you are running some real risks. In terms of those relationships that matter, in terms of the brand that people have of you, and in terms of how it's going to help you or not in the years to come. And you might be invisible, which is not great, or otherwise you might be visible for all the wrong reasons. So again, there's a lot of research that says that conflict and disagreements are way more amplified in remote working environments. And we can see that in a lot of social media around us as well, right? And it's called the social disinhibition effect, where you can type something on your laptop, press send much more easily and with much more venom than when you're actually having to talk to that person or run the risk of bumping into that person in the passage. And so all the research that I've been doing says that conflict and breakdowns in relationships and disagreements happen way quicker online. They last for a lot longer, and the damage that gets done is way bigger than in real life. So like I say, not a good idea to be invisible. Even worse idea is to be visible for the wrong reasons, because people are seeing you fly off the handle, show all kinds of emotions that are really better left in check. And the last thing is, let's get real. I don't know about you, but for me, there's been some real periods of loneliness in this time. And I'm very happily married, and I have worked for myself for 3 years, and we've had 1 or 2 people come to the house when lockdown was eased. And yet, I have found this time very difficult, and the opportunity to connect with other people in the way this webinar tries to do has been so rewarding and so enriching and so feeding my soul at times when I've really needed it. And this from somebody who thoroughly enjoys her own company, quite happy to work by herself. And so in this time of distress and loneliness, even more so, you've got to watch the impact that that loneliness can have on you and your ability to deliver, and on the relationships that you have and that you need to have and that you need to nurture, need to maintain. Because it's all too often a risk that when we're lonely, we withdraw instead of building the relationships. Or if we're lonely, everything just starts to unravel. And so the work that you're responsible for starts to decline in quality and output, which means that people are starting to get unimpressed with you, which means that you're being sidelined or marginalized, which means that you get more lonely, which means that the work gets worse, and so the vicious cycle continues. And so all of these things come together to say, politics matter. They've always mattered. And in fact, they're going to matter, and they do matter even more now in virtual environments. So I would invite you to really think about how you are using this time. I'd invite you to think about how you're managing your brand in your organization. It's different now in a webinar. You've been asked to mute yourself. You've been asked to not come on video. But all the other work meetings that you're part of, are you putting yourself out there? Are you staying relevant? Are you building the relationships? Do you have more of a brand than the round circle with your initials on? Are you arriving at these meetings properly dressed and properly prepared? Or do you look, like I have seen on some calls, like you have literally just gotten up? This is a difficult time. And in the difficulty, there are all kinds of seeds of possibility. To think about yourself, to think about the subject, to think about your career quite differently. And so that's my invitation. Because certainly the option to opt out is probably the less wise option. Not only because opportunities will pass you by, but because a whole bunch of less than pleasant things can happen to you as well. And no doubt you, like me, have got some of those stories. So get smart, get in the arena, play the game according to the rules that make sense to you, and know that that's not only possible, but actually critical, especially at a time like we have now. And that's it.
Sure, Niven. Thank you so much. As always, very inspiring, very powerful. I think for me, it's a bit of a wake-up call. But yeah, some interesting points and interesting notes to think of. So while I'm asking you to cut your screen so I can put our screen back up, and before we go to Melanie, I'm just going to throw a question at you, and that is, you've spoken a lot about building the relationships and not just focusing on the task at hand. Mm-hmm. But as fundraisers and people working in the nonprofit sector, where relationships are crucial. How do we navigate, and what tips have you got for the audience now that we're working remotely to enhance those relationships with our donors and with our colleagues? Because I'm finding that everyone is so task driven with working remotely that they're forgetting about the chats at the coffee station, which is part of building the relationship. So what is your 1 or 2 bits of advice or tidbits you can give us?
Yeah, so Kelvin, I think the advice is always the same. And it starts with an awareness of how important this is. Because I think it's very easy to let the relationships slide when you don't realize how important they are. They feel secondary, they feel less important, less urgent than just getting through the inbox, getting the proposals out, getting back to donors. And so hopefully if you are aware of how important this is, you start to take action to build it. And I'm seeing it, and I am incredibly grateful for people who are reaching out to me to say, do you have half an hour just for a chat? And there is no agenda. They're not needing something. They're not wanting something. I mean, I wouldn't have a problem if they did, but they're just reaching out. And Monica Stach, who's the CEO of Kotlin's, and like I said, I'm on the board, I'm the vice chair. Monica got hold of me the other day and she said, I just miss talking to you. Can you make yourself a cup of tea while I make myself a cup of coffee? And can we just chat? There's nothing about Kotlin's. It was all about her birthday. It was about my holiday plans that had been cancelled. And I felt so immensely enriched by just a 25-minute chat. And I don't think enough of us are making time and putting the time and making the effort to do that, because like I say, it feels like a distraction, which is generally how people view it. It's not normally, and it's especially not now. And I'm seeing it in very good leaders. They are spending a disproportionate amount of their time checking in with people. How are you? What's going on? Making sure that people are okay, as opposed to, guys, let's just get on with things. So this is not a new thing, this focus on the task at the expense of relationships. It's a realization all the time. But now it takes even more effort. And I think you get even more rewards if you put that effort in now, because we're all craving connection so much.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Niven. And I think also, just to add on to that, a tidbit is that, especially when we work with communities and beneficiaries, there's nothing more rewarding and of a privilege to be able to go out to the communities and physically touch and engage your beneficiaries, so you can tell those stories to your donors. But we can't do that right now. So even now, ladies and gentlemen, it's vitally important that you connect with your beneficiaries in one way, shape, or form, through your team or whatever, because unless you can tell those personal stories, it's going to be that much more difficult to fundraise and raise awareness. So, Melanie.
But Kelvin, can I just add to that quickly before you ask for a question? Absolutely. But it's not just about the fundraising and being able to tell the story. I mean, most people get into NGOs because these stories inspire them. So you need it to remind yourself what you're doing and why you're doing it, and to nurture yourself. So don't be blind to how much we all need support and how you can get support from some of these stories.
Yeah. Thanks, Niven. Melanie?
Yes, so we have got some really interesting questions. Karen would like to know, how does one develop the skills to become adept at dealing with derailment due to politics in an organization?
Yeah, so Karen, I think the best advice I can give is don't get derailed in the first place. Of course, it's possible to recover from derailment. And I mean, I've had a significant career derailment in my career once, and let me tell you about it. So essentially, I got called in on the Friday afternoon, and I got told the work that I was doing was all shifting into business as usual. So thanks so much. We'll pay you a big fat retrenchment package, which are some of the nice things that you get from working in large organizations that you don't get in NGOs. We'll pay you this big fat retrenchment package, but don't come in on Monday. Thanks, but no thanks. And I remember the Friday afternoon, it was about 4:15. I skipped out of that building. I was so excited because it had become incredibly difficult to navigate some of the things that were going on. I skipped out. I phoned my partner. I said, I've just been retrenched. I'm so excited. And I had this nice payout. And it was my partner who pointed out to me, Nibby Pops, you have not been retrenched. You've just been fired. And let me tell you, leaving that position and having that position taken away from me was probably the best thing that could have happened. But less lekker was having somebody else make that decision for me and about me. And so I think one of the most important ways to deal with derailment is don't even go there in the first place. Try to avoid that cliff, avoid the traps. And, you know, in a full day lecture, I talk about some of the traps that you must avoid. So becoming the problem, criticizing your company, getting on the wrong side of your boss. There's a whole bunch of things that are really stupid mistakes to make. So just because you don't make the stupid mistakes doesn't mean your career won't derail. But at the very least, avoiding those gives you a better chance to make sure that you're taking care of the things that you need to, the relationships, the perceptions, the stakeholders, the network that needs to be on your side if you're going to achieve what you need to. So Karen, I'm not sure if that answered your question, but there's a lot of stuff from the CCL, the Center for Conscious Leadership. They've done a whole study on what makes executives' careers derail. And if that hasn't answered your question, or if you'd like to know more, go have a look at it, just Google it.
That's wonderful, thank you. And then a follow-on. Conflict is due to communication, approach, tone, and body language. In a remote environment, I agree that it's amplified and we often don't pick up the phone or directly address the person and the issue. How can we engage the other person if we know that the person is using dirty politics for self-gain?
Yeah, so whose question is this, Melanie?
It's another from Karen.
Ah, Karen, you've got them firing, man. Look, I suppose a couple of things in your question. So part of what you're asking is, if I remember correctly, Melanie, correct me if I'm not, you know, calling people out who are using dirty politics. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, and don't do that. Don't do that. And I'm not talking about unless, you know, if they're doing unethical stuff, they're doing criminal stuff, then you've got whistle hot blowing lines. And I have used a whistle hot blowing line once, and I've seen somebody fired as a result. But that's a very different way of needing to call out somebody that you assume are doing bad politics for a whole bunch of reasons. One, you know, your interpretation of the situation is simply your interpretation. And trust me, it took me a long time to realize that, because Kelvin knows the experience that I had in one organization with somebody who was so toxic and so destructive. I actually think I got sick from it a few years later. It was awful. So I know it's easier said than done to say that there's always more to the story than what you realize, but I should have known that. And I should have tried to hold on to that when I was getting incredibly frustrated and incredibly angry with what I was convinced were bad politics. So don't call people on it. Let the organization see it. And again, you know, it's hard for me to say that because I make things better. I speak truth to power. I say things like they are, and that's just part of who I am. And quite frankly, I think that's valuable in a world where nobody says what they actually think. You can keep doing that, but you will keep hitting your head against a brick wall. Because the second piece of advice I want to give you, and it's something I really had to learn, was if you've got a choice between being right and being effective, Karen, choose being effective. So what I'm saying here is you may well not be right about the bad politics you think this person is playing. There might be a whole bunch more going on that you don't realize. And even if you are right, it's not going to help you. Report it if you need to. Take it up with the necessary whistle hot blowing line if you need to. But in your circle of influence and in how you're showing up, if you're going head to head with somebody constantly, it's not going to work in your favor. And I can speak from experience. People start to avoid you. People start to, oh, there she goes on again about this person, if you're anything like me. So if you can choose between being right, even if you're right in the situation, and being effective, be effective. How do you build the relationships despite this? How do you manage around it? How do you navigate it despite it? And like I say, this is easy, this is simple to say. When your blood is boiling or somebody is really, quite frankly, disgusting you sometimes in how they're showing up, It's much harder to do, but it's the much wiser thing to do.
Thanks,
All
Niven.
right, we have time for one more question.
Wait. I have 2 questions.
Okay.
Okay, I'll try to be brief in my answers.
Okay, this is a follow-up, and that's why I'm so keen to ask it. Laurence from ZipZap wants to know, isn't bad politics a way of venting frustration or perhaps misunderstanding the situation?
Yeah, it could absolutely be both. So, like I've said to Cara now, your perception of the situation is just your perception. There's always more to the situation than you realize. But absolutely, one of the quotes from Rosabeth Moss-Cantor that I also love is that it's perceptions of powerlessness that make people terrible managers. And I don't know about you, but I've seen that in my experience, is often when you need to win at the expense of other people, when you need to prove how important you are, when you need to influence at the expense of other people, it's because you're not fully confident in your own self. When you are, you can just get on with things. That whole idea of those who mind don't matter and those who matter don't mind. So yes, bad politics can come from all kinds of things, and quite frankly, it can come from people who are psychopaths, and they do exist to approximately 5% in organizations. This is also real, multiple reasons.
Great, thank you for that. So my last question is a very practical one from Debbie. Is the book available on Amazon or other download platforms?
Yes, thanks, Debbie. Yeah, so it is. It hasn't been uploaded to Amazon and Apple yet, but it is busy being uploaded because actually it only launches next week. So it's physically hot off the press, but we're only launching it next week.
Wonderful, thank you. So I'm going to hand back to Kelvin because Kelvin's got something exciting going on.
Thank you so much, Niven. I just want to find my slides. Where they gone? There we go. Okay. Can everyone see my? Sorry, I just need to share the last bit so that we can get the housekeeping done. Share screen. One thinks one's good at these things when you've done them 400 times. Eh?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, 1 second. Share screen. Okay, so once again, we are really, really privileged to have had you on. We did say in the advert, and we will stick to our word, we are giving away 1 signed copy of the book. So, Mel, do you agree on what we discussed?
I agree.
All right, so I'll let you do the announcement because you facilitated that.
So, we are super excited to have one of those very hot off the press copies available as a prize for the engagement, the interest, and the kinds of questions that were asked. I am very happy to say, Karen Pillay, that we will be arranging for a copy to be sent over to you. Well done.
Signed copy. I'll get to Niven and get an autograph for you so we can get it shipped off to you.
Lovely.
And then, guys, you'll see on the screen, and this will be in the recording as well, there is a link. Also, please follow Niven on LinkedIn. It's on her LinkedIn as well, of how you can get hold of the book, both the soft copy and the hard copy. And as Niven says, literally, the public launch is next week, but my stockpile is en route to me. So as soon as I get that, I will be getting your copy through to you, Karen. And thanks again, Niven, for sharing with us a very inspiring talk. And also, I think that this is going to be a great tool for all of us and for our organizations. And I think it's opened everyone's eyes to be bold and realize that if you don't do the politics will do you. So, yeah. On that note, guys, the screen's jumping. All right. The disruptors, as I've now called ourselves. Melanie and I started Fundraising Talk, 3.5 months ago now. I think this is our 18th webinar. Those are our contact details. Please reach out to us if you need anything. We also love having chats. And also, we have a WhatsApp group with a number of people on where we share stuff, we collaborate, we give information, we support each other. So if you want to be part of that WhatsApp group, please get hold of either of us and we'll add you. Also, you'll see great news, technology, we are embracing it. We have uploaded, I think, 9 or 10 of the previous webinars onto a YouTube channel, which is on your screen and will be in the recording. And I'll also put it in the WhatsApp group. And this presentation will be there probably by the latest this evening, which means that you don't have to worry about downloading it because it's going to be deleted. It'll stay on YouTube forever. It's a lovely resource. So if you've missed any of the previous webinars, please go to the YouTube channel. There's some fantastic resources there, because every alternate week we have a guest speaker, which means that you're not only getting our years of experience and knowledge, but also you're getting different perspectives from global leaders and leaders in their respective industries. And on that, please dial us next week. Melanie and I are going to be talking about prospect research. So where to find those golden gems and golden nuggets of donors. And then the 13th of August, we are going to have guest speakers from the Resource Alliance, and they are going to talk about the new global community for fundraising and change makers. For those of you that don't know, the Resource Alliance is a global organization that supports fundraisers around the world, and annually used to put together an annual conference which had about 1,000 fundraisers from all over the world and wonderful guest speakers. But unfortunately this year it's had to be cancelled and it's all going virtual. So they're going to be talking to us